challenge isn't going to be telling you about all of these books. It's about making sure that I haven't pre-ordered all of them by the end of the video. Because for a girl who spent a long time being very paranoid about the amount of books that she purchased in 2024, it doesn't exactly sound like she's tremendously changing her ways in 2025. It's Leanne and welcome back to another video. Welcome back to the second video in recent memory on my channel in which I look like this. Yes, puzzling, I know. While you guys are probably very used to seeing me in vlogs with a naked face, it is not my preferred filming situation. I am cramming this video in between all of the things and your gal just doesn't have time to be pretty. Practical, not pretty, that's what we're going for. Because today's video is one of your favourite videos in December on my channel, and that is my most anticipated books for the first half of 2025. The books that positively light up my life. Yeah. Makeup or no makeup, I still am who I am as a person. Should I just leave them on for the entire video or should I light them up specifically when a book lights me up? And speaking of lighting things up, see the way I just like slid into that one? Segued my way into telling you that lighting is one of the most important things to you and I this Christmas season. And I'm sure that you can tell because this is probably the last video that I will be filming without my massive studio lights. Which sucks for both of us, but mostly me. Some lighting that does not suck, however, in Scotland or anywhere else comes from the sponsors of today's video, Serious Readers. By now you guys know that Serious Readers are some of my favourite people in the world. They are a small UK company who make all of their serious lights in-house. At a time when the world is forcing us more and more to choose to buy from big box stores, having the opportunity to support a small UK business makes me really happy. Serious Readers have created the Serious Lights range for all of your reading needs. Whether that's curling up by the Christmas tree with a Christmas carol, or whether you have no festivities plans and your plan is just to be a mole in a hole, at least you'll be a mole in a hole with great lighting. Not only are Serious Readers Serious Lights sleek in their design, fitting perfectly into whatever aesthetic you've curated for yourself, with fully adjustable both height and reach, brightening and dimming and range of beam options, Serious Readers are also the only people to use daylight wavelength technology. Daylight wavelength technology creates a light that replicates for your eyes natural daylight, which is what your eyes really need to thrive. And as somebody with a pretty high prescription, that is super important to me, as I never plan to not be using these. So if you would like to get your hands on a Serious light from Serious Readers, you can use my code Leanne24 and my link down in the description below to get £100 off of one of their Serious lights, plus free UK delivery. Because while they ship worldwide, we definitely need some sort of little brightening boost in the UK. These days do be dark. Oh, have you ever nodded emphatically enough that you can feel your brain move? I mean, at least it proves there's one in there, but jeez. Okay, so I have 27 separate books to talk to you guys about here today. Why do I do this to myself? So we're gonna have to make every single second of this video count. The descriptions of these books must be a sprint, not a marathon. And I'm gonna be trying to go through these books in roughly chronological publication order. And obviously, before we get started, the usual caveats apply. I am not the publisher of any of these books. A lot of publication dates do seem to use the method of throw the spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks. As usual, because I can't give very much detail when I talk about sequels, I'm going to quickly get the sequels out of the way at the start of this video so we can get on to the deliciousness of new premises. The first book on this list has to be one that literally everybody has predicted being on this list, and that is Red God by Pierce Brown. Red God is the 7th and final book in the Red Rising series, which was a series that I became absolutely obsessed with this year and have not stopped talking about pretty much. And while I have great fear, I also have great anticipation for Red God. Next in my sequels list, coming out on the 25th of May, we have The Dark Mirror by Samantha Shannon. This is book 5 in the Bone season. This is also one of my favourite series ever, but my reading of it when it comes out is going to entirely depend on whether I have had a chance to reread the series before it comes out, because for those of you newly coming to this series, Samantha Shannon has in 2024 republished this entire series in a preferred Author's Edition. She originally wrote this series when she was much younger, and she has wanted for years and years to take another pass at it, to make, amongst other things, the pacing make a lot more sense, to add a lot more diversity, and as Samantha Shannon has said herself, to undo some of the more like toxic ideas that she grew up with, which she has now unlearned as a person. And because of that, some characters have been newly added and some things in the timeline have been changed around, and the Dark Mirror is following that alternative preferred Author's Edition timeline, which does mean that if you want to understand everything that's going on in the Bone season, you kind of have to pick up the new series. Coming out on either the 7th of January or the 26th of February, depending on which website you peruse, we have book 10 in the Wayward Children series by Sean McGuire. How have I been reading these books for long enough that there are now 10 books in this series? We are actually going to revisit the character of Lydia. This is actually something Sean McGuire does quite a lot in this series. There's a lot of loose timeline shifting. I feel like this series is perfect for you if you are somebody who likes a side character, because no side characters are left behind in this series. Then on the 6th of May we have The Strength of the Few, which is the follow-up to The Will of the Many by James Islington. The cover controversy aside with this one, I am very, very excited for this. Will of the Many is one of my favourite books from 2024. I would be very, very surprised if you don't find it on my top 10 books list. It's such a new and nuanced world, like a complete breath of fresh air. People constantly ask me, because of the buzz around this one, if it would be a good fantasy book to start with, and I really do think that it would. It's one of those fantasy books that can easily bridge the gap between other genres, so if you are on the fence about it, I say give it a go, especially because soon you're going to have book 2 to go straight onto if you are obsessed, unlike the rest of us who have had to wait an entire lifetime. Okay, let's get on to the entirely new to me most anticipated releases. The first one that I've got comes out on the 30th of January, and it is Both and Neither by Alex Morzano-Lesnevich. I can see you all digging into the back of your brains to try and work out where you have heard me say that name before. Alex Morzano-Lesnevich wrote The Fact of a Body, which is one of my absolute favourite true crime memoirs that I have ever read in my entire life. But this one is very different from The Fact of a Body because it is entirely about Alex's transition and their queerness, and also their investigation of identity. And this book is comprised of their story and other stories about identity and gender that they have compiled for this book. I could not be more excited. Next up, coming out on the 28th of January. Oh, I cannot wait to get my hands on it. This is At the Bottom of the Garden by Camilla Bruce, and it is kind of another book in the female rage category. That category has definitely had a big bump in the last sort of years, phenomenon which I am very much here for, but I do acknowledge can be quite variable in the execution. But this one is not a thriller take on it, it is a horror take on it, and I think that is why I am the most excited for it. So At the Bottom of the Garden is about Clara. She has been killing people off and on her entire life just to make her life easier. People who have wronged her, people who have got in her way, and she doesn't really see anything wrong with this. She considers it a kind of service. And amongst all of the other people that she has killed, at the bottom of her garden is the body of her husband, resting, as she thought, completely out of the eyes of everybody else, unknown from the world, until one day she gets a phone call to tell her that her 2 nieces have been orphaned. Lily and Violet's parents were extremely wealthy. They have come from a lot of privilege, and landing on Clara's doorstep is a bit of a coming down for them. And Clara honestly doesn't know what she is planning to do with these 2 girls that have just been thrust upon her, when all of a sudden the situation becomes so much more complicated because Violet can see the dead man at the bottom of the garden. In fact, Violet can see all of Clara's ghosts, which presents a much bigger problem. Oh, I've jumped one. Okay, on the 7th of January we have got Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod-Chapman. I am actually reading their debut right now, and I'm very, very much enjoying it. Which is actually the only reason why I'm considering picking this one up, because the premise of this one doesn't quite do it for me in the same way. Although there are definitely some aspects of it which do kind of scream Leanne. This one is about Noah, who grew up in a small southern town and got out of that small southern town as quickly as he physically could. Noah has watched from afar as his parents have slowly become more and more far right in their views, as they have been swallowed up by spending all of their time with certain news outlets, certain apps. Then one day Noah receives a really garbled voicemail from his mother telling him that the Great Awakening is about to happen and that they all have to be prepared. Getting no answers to his phone calls, he races home only to discover his parents taken up in some sort of fever and his mother physically attacks him. Noah quickly discovers that he's not the only one to be physically attacked by a loved one in that general vicinity, and what follows sounds like a little bit of a take on The Walking Dead. Blurb for this one does mention The Last of Us, so I am assuming this is some sort of like a post-apocalyptic scenario in which maybe the preppers were right. Alright, I think we're safe to move on to February. So next up, coming out on the 4th of February, is a book that I might genuinely like more for its title and cover than I do for its synopsis. This one is Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feito. Virginia Feito is the author of Mrs. March, which is a book that my patrons have managed to get on my shelves. But I will say that if the writing is anything like the first chapter of Mrs. March, which I have read, then it does intrigue me. This one is about Winifred, and she is a governess, a Victorian governess. She can be found creeping across moonlit lawns in her undergarments or gently tormenting the house staff, but Winifred struggles at every turn to stifle the horrid compulsions of her past. She apparently has a chilling imagination which she is hoping to imprint on the two children, Drusilla and Andrew. This one has been shelved in all sorts of weird places on all sorts of different websites. Like, it's historical, some of them are like, no, it's straight up horror, a couple of them it's sitting in like gothic literary fiction, so I don't know exactly how to pin this one down, and that's kind of half the fun of it. Coming out on either the 15th of February or right at the start of April, again depending on which outlet you go with, we have Notes on a Regicide by Isaac Fellman. This one is billed as both somehow sci-fi, queer, and a sort of exploration of trans identity, and I'm not exactly sure how all of these things piece together with the actual synopsis of it, but I'm waiting and willing to be schooled. The blurb of this one starts with the line, "When your parents die, you find out who they really were." Griffin considers themselves to be kind of blessed in their second chance. Griffin's second set of parents really took care of them. They healed a lot of the wounds that they had from their previous life. Despite all of this, Griffin still has unanswered questions about their original set of parents. And now that they are definite in their intention to find out what happened, Griffin's second set of parents, adopted parents, new parents, better parents, hand them the journal that their father wrote while he was in a jail cell awaiting execution. And as Griffin starts to read the entries in this journal, they discover that their parents' lives were far more complicated than they could ever have imagined. According to the end of the blurb, it says, "Notes from a Regicide is a trans family saga set in a far-off, familiar future." So again, not sure how all of these elements that are promised are going to play out against each other, but I am there to find out. Next up, coming out on the 25th of February, is another one that I cannot wait to get my sweaty little hands on. It is Something in the Walls by Daisy Pierce, and something about the synopsis of this one really reminded me of The Upstairs Room by Kate Murray Brown, which is also another book that you know that I love. It has that, is this actually paranormal phenomena, or is the person reporting it going through something or fabricating something for a reason? This one follows Mina. She is a newly qualified child psychologist, but she is struggling in a lot of aspects in her life. One, she can't get a job in the field that she's just qualified in. Two, she has a small, very close, very suffocating marriage in a very small, close, suffocating British village by the sounds of it, and the only kind of relief that she gets from that is being able to go to a bereavement group. Several years ago her brother died and she has been going to this group now consistently. However, one day at her bereavement group she meets a journalist called Sam Hunter who specifically wants to talk to her. He wants to talk to her about a young girl called Alice. She claims that a witch is haunting her, and her behaviour and her symptoms are getting increasingly and slowly worse. Her family believe that she's in psychological distress, but Sam believes that she might actually be telling the truth. And as a perfectly newly minted child psychologist, Sam thinks that maybe Mina is the perfect person to investigate. And so do I. Give me this now. We are going to head on into March now, and I'm going to tell you right now, there are so many books coming out in March. Clearly, March babies are the best babies and we get all the best gifts. Because there are so many books in March, I'm not even going to try and put these in date order. I'm just going to go in the order that I've written them down. And the first one of the books that's coming out in March is When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi. Now, I have a proof of this on the way to me right now, and when I got the email in my inbox, it was all I could do to stop myself from replying like, I will do anything for a copy of this. possibly even illegal things. But my very favourite John Scalzi books are the ones in the vein of Fuzzy Nation and Kaiju Preservation Society, the really funny ones that have deep heart in them. In this book, essentially the moon literally does turn to cheese. And the synopsis for this one says, through the length of an entire lunar cycle from a new moon to a spectacular and possibly final solar eclipse, we follow multiple characters, school kids and scientists and billionaires and workers, preachers and politicians, as they confront the strange new world they live in and the absurd impossible moon that now hangs above their lives. If any other author put this premise in front of me, I would be like, nah mate. But it's John Scalzi, so he could write about toenails and I would probably read it. Okay, technically this one should have been in the sequels category, but we'll just go with it. Coming out on March 18th, this is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. And when I say that I am sitting entirely on the fence, so much so that I have splinters in unmentionable places, I cannot emphasize it enough. Because I am somebody who actually thinks that The Hunger Games, the first book in the trilogy, could quite easily have sat on its own. I genuinely love the movie series, but as far as I'm concerned, the books themselves actually got worse the further they went through the series. Plus, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think that if these books were written in 2025 when the new one is being published, then there wouldn't have actually been a love triangle at the centre of it, because there would probably have been more queerness in these books, and so there would have been other possibilities for those relationships. And so I am hoping above hope that this book redeems it a little bit for me, but I'll also not be running out to buy it in special edition hardback or anything. I'm probably going to just wait until it comes to my library, not gonna lie. Coming out on the 5th of March, we have the latest offering from Ashley Winstead, and it is called This Book Will Bury Me, and it sounds very much like it's a book for me. This one is about Jane. She's a college student whose father has recently shockingly passed away, and as a way to sort of like cope with her grief, she becomes a little bit too obsessed with true crime. So much so that she joins a bunch of societies of people who are also armchair detectives who want to solve current cases. However, when 3 college girls are killed in Idaho in really horrible circumstances, Jane and her friends decide that they are going to beat everybody else to the punch and they are going to be the ones to solve this. Except when they get there, they discover that these murders have something to do with one of the most famous unsolved murders in American history. This one also has one of my favourite formats for books that kind of deal with true crime and podcasts and things like that, in that it is told after the events. It's told a year after all of these things happen, and so they can be pieced together with hindsight, which Ashley Winstead is quickly becoming one of my favourite thriller / almost horror authors, and I'm here for anything that she chooses to serve me. Next up, coming up on the 18th of March, is another one that is right up my alley. It's like publishers knew and they just gave me all of the good things in March. This is The Haunting of Room 904 by Erica T. Worth, and it has all of my favourite things in one place. This one is about Olivia, and she was never meant to have her family's gifts until her sister unexpectedly dies and she's in the same room with her body. Her sister's gifts pass to Olivia, and she is now stuck with the ability to speak to dead people. Years and years later, Olivia is now the only paranormal investigator in her city, and she's doing pretty good business. And that's when she hears about Brown Palace, a hotel which has one room which is constantly haunted, and the owner just cannot explain why so many girls have died in that room, and they cannot keep the hotel open under these circumstances. Tell me which bit of that wasn't just written for me. Next up, trundling along into May, there are 2 very different kinds of releases coming up. On the 13th of May, we've got The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. You know that I love The Blade itself, at least the first trilogy, but I am very happy to have something from him in a different world. But this one definitely seems like it's kind of got one foot in a departure. We're in a new world, we have new characters, but the other foot very much in some familiar themes for Joe Abercrombie. This one says, Holy work sometimes requires unholy deeds. And again, does that or does that not sound like Inquisitor Glocka kind of all over again? Brother Diaz has been summoned to the sacred city where he is certain accommodation and a grand holy assignment await him. But his new flock is made up of unrepentant murderers, practitioners of ghastly magic, and outright monsters, and the mission he is tasked with will require bloody measures from them all in order to achieve its righteous ends. This is one that I'm likely to actually pre-order and read when it comes out next year, and I can't say the same for some of the other ones on this list, which I am going to be waiting for either reviews on, or library copies, or samples, or arcs, before I decide whether I'm investing actual cashola into them next year. Now, when I say that the next book on this list couldn't be more different, I really wasn't joking. It's the only memoir that is on this list, which is quite unusual for me. This is What My Father and I Don't Talk About, an essay collection edited by Michelle Filgate. If you have been around here for a little while, then you will know that the first in this sort of like companion series of memoirs, What My Mother and I Don't Talk About, is one of my favourite books of all time. As somebody who is A, adopted, and B, has a complicated family dynamic, I am always interested in the dynamics of other people's families. Some still have an active relationship with their mother, some have rebuilt their relationships with their mother after abuse or domestic violence, some have mothers who are first generation immigrants to a country who now kind of exist outside of the scope of the writer's experience as somebody who is second generation and grew up in American culture. And when I discovered that Michelle Filgate was bringing out a sequel to this, I pre-ordered it so fast. Honestly, if the premise of this even at all interests you, I say try and get your hands on the first one because it's just... Next up, coming out on the 10th of June is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because I absolutely guarantee you that if you are somebody who likes to watch most anticipated videos, you will already know about this book. When it comes to me personally, V.E. Schwab is a bit of a hit and miss. But from what I understand, this is a standalone adult novel from V.E. Schwab. It is told across 3 different timelines with 3 completely different women, all of whose stories intersect at different points. So I definitely will be giving this one a shot, but whether or not it's my last shot with V.E. Schwab remains to be seen. Next up, coming out on the 3rd of June is a book that nearly made me scream when it got a release date. This is The Listeners by Maggie Stiefvater, and it is a standalone historical magical realism adult novel. I think I hit all of the points. I'm too excited to actually make sense, and the bin men are outside and it's very loud. You guys know that I love Maggie Stiefvater. I am a lover of Maggie Stiefvater from way back when, but this year I read The Raven Boys and it just firmly cemented her as one of my favourite authors ever. It is set way back in the Appalachian Mountains where people come to enjoy its hot springs, and it's very much 5-star service. But when the Avalon is taken over by the war effort and is forced to host 300 diplomats and Nazi sympathisers, the general manager of the Avalon, June, is just trying to keep business as usual going. But in amongst these guests is Tucker Minnick, an FBI agent who comes from a very similar background to June and who is absolutely determined to investigate and uproot some of these diplomats' secrets under her roof. Now, this one is being marketed in 2 very different ways. With this cover, which is very much like Maggie Stiefvater readers will recognise this cover, and then this cover, which looks very much like British literary fiction as far as I'm concerned. I am absolutely primed for this one. Alright, we are nearly at the end. We are in July, and thankfully in July, on the 3rd of July no less, we have another adult thriller from Lisa Jewell. I had got really used to and really spoiled with Lisa Jewell bringing out like a book every year, and then the last book that she brought out was a Marvel companion novel, which is not something that I would ever read, and so I got a bit salty because I was like, where's my normal Lisa Jewell? And here it is. This is once again, as per all of Lisa Jewell's books, a thriller told over 2 entirely different perspectives that are actually tied together even though the 2 don't know that they are. In our first perspective we have Nina. She was living a perfectly normal life with her husband and her very young daughter when somebody, completely out of the blue and seemingly with no provocation, pushed her husband off of a train platform into the path of an oncoming train and left her not only a widow, but a widow who has absolutely no idea why this thing has happened to her. And in the midst of trying to manage the restaurant that she's then left with that she knows nothing about and raise her daughter, she receives a gift in the mail from an old friend of her husband's, which has a strange note in it and an otherwise fairly nondescript lighter. Meanwhile, we have Martha. She's absolutely devoted to her kids, her job, and her second husband Al and their brand new baby. But Martha's life seems to be getting more and more difficult. They never have any money. They are constantly struggling to make ends meet, and Al is constantly traveling for work. So she's starting to feel kind of like she's a single parent. But then the blurb says, Nick and Al may not be who they say they are, leading these women on a shocking collision course. I said this really recently, but I think when you find a thriller author who does a very different plot each time, but has the kinds of characters that just work for you, and a certain way of storytelling that kind of gets recycled between stories, then you just stick to them like glue. They're candy floss for the brain for you, and that is definitely Lisa Jo for me. And now I think we've moved into August. I think I only have 2 left. I may be miscalculating and I'll be really annoyed later if I am, but I only seem to have 2 left on this list. The first one coming out on the 26th of August is 8114 by Joshua Hall. The cover of this is giving that very specific kind of psychological twisty horror movie where you're never entirely sure what's going on, and you have very weird camera angles of all these different people looking moodily at each other from behind windows, so obviously I'm here for it. This one is about Paul. One of his friends unalives himself in his apartment and he does not know why. He has no idea why his friend would do something like this. It's completely out of character, and so he goes there to his apartment to try and investigate what happened. But the more he interviews people in this small town in which he also grew up, the more his memories of this town start to get a little bit dicky. They start gluing together in weird ways. Patterns start emerging. He starts to wonder if he really actually knows the place that he grew up in at all, or his friend. So many different degrees of yes please. And then finally, I am going to give an author another bash. Coming out on the 12th of August, we have Too Old for This by Samantha Downing. I've tried a couple of different arcs of Samantha Downing in the past and I never ended up finishing them. I DNF'd both of them. They were okay, but there was nothing in there to like hold me in the story and make me want to keep reading. This one is about Lottie Jones. She used to be a serial killer, but she has long since hung up her hat. But then a journalist turns up on her front doorstep. Somebody who has put together a few different threads and has some questions about Lottie's past. And as the blurb says, Lottie just can't have that. Blurb finishes off by saying, but getting away with murder is hard enough when you're young, and when Lottie receives another annoying knock on the door, she realises this crime might just be the death of her. You guys know that characters over 50 in books have always been my jam. But this very recent trend in thrillers of having more and more characters who are not only just like over 50, but who are actually like 70 and 80 has been absolutely thrilling me. No pun intended, but good pun made anyway. And I am so looking forward to trying this. I am hoping that the premise of it is enough to pull me over the edge and keep me engaged. So that is it, guys. Those are all of the 20 something, I don't know numbers, I've forgotten it already, books that I am looking forward to in 2025. If you have got this far through the video, then please leave me the little gift box emoji down below, the present, because these are 20 odd tiny little presents that 2025 is going to give to us to make the year just that little bit easier, just that little bit better than 2024. And of course, please tell me down below if you are also anticipating any of these books, or if there are any books that I should be anticipating that I have missed. Don't forget, if you would like to get your hands on a Serious Light from Serious Readers and you would like to get some pennies off this Christmas season, then you can use my code here on screen, Leanne24, to get £100 off of a Serious Readers Serious Light. If you're new to my channel and you would like to know how many of these books that I end up picking up in 2025, then please hit that subscribe button. And if you're a returning subscriber who is instead waiting on the numbers of how many books I already bought in 2024, then please like this video because it really does help my channel and also my sanity. And I will speak to you guys really soon. Bye!